Hi, I'm Bernie from Crafter's Companion. Today I'm going to show you how to use our Kaleidoscope rotating quilting pattern guide. This is it here. Let me pop some paper behind. So what we've got here is our acrylic shape. We've got markings on there which I'm going to take you through, and then we've got the shape here. And you might look at it and think, well, that's a little bit strange, but actually when you get the packaging home you'll see all the designs that you can actually do to make this into a fantastic centerpiece. It can go on your coasters, your cushions, your bags, anything that you want to quilt, pet blankets, anything. You can use it. So let's see what we need to actually use our pattern guides. So obviously you're going to need your pattern guide. We're going to have our reference tool. So this is what's going to help us plot out the design on the fabric. You're going to need your project, which today I'm going to use this is a 13-inch square. You're going to need a heat erasable pen to use your marks, or a chalk pen, air erasable, whichever your marking preference is. Your scissors, your sewing machine, a slider mat if you have one. I'll show you how you use that. And also some quilting gloves. Right, so you're going to get your fabric prepared first, and then I'll show you how we set up the machine as well. So you're going to take your project, and we'll have our reference guide. Now with these rotating guides, you don't actually use, or need to use, sorry, the measurements on here. You just need those grooves that we're just going to plot across. Now there's 8 in here, we're going to put 8, and it's important to get that center one as well. So let's go ahead and get all of those lines drawn on. So once you've got your grid lines all marked up, so you can actually see we've got those crosses on there. We're now going to set the machine up. So let's bring the machine in. So if you have an extension table, that's great. It will give, the more room area you've got here, the better. You also need to have a ruler foot on your machine. Now, if you have a free motion foot or a darning foot, that's a different foot. This foot's actually deeper, and that's what butts up against the acrylic. If you use a embroidery foot, that has a thinner foot, so you can actually break your needle, damage your machine. You will take off your foot. When you take off your foot with the ankle, keep that attached so you don't lose it. Pop that in your little accessory box. Okay, so we mentioned the slider before. So if you have one of these, if you don't, you can still use them. It's just an extra thing you use. Now, what you're going to do, get it the correct way around, you're going to feed it under your machine, and they'll normally come without a hole in, and you'll just cut a little hole in there. And this is like it's sticky, but it isn't, but it grips, and then it just peels away, and there's no residue here at all. And you can clean them with warm soapy water as well if you do get them full of thread ends, which, yeah, we'll probably go new in our sewing rooms. So I'm just going to bring up my needle and then bring up the thread. I put my foot down as well. If you don't put your foot down, which I always do, you'll think something's happened there, it's not moving, but that's because you need to put the foot down. All right, so let's get our project and our guide. Now the lines on the guide that we can see, these are what you're going to use to line up to those marks that you left from the reference guide. And then that center point, you're always going to see through that hole there. And that helps you keep your design lined up and balanced. If you go off a little bit, it's absolutely fine. Honestly, you're not going to notice it. So we're going to line that up, and then you're going to take it under, and you're going to go to your start channel. And here we're going to bring that thread up to the top. So if I grab my scissors. So the reason I always bring my bobbin thread up is that you don't want it to catch underneath a nest, because that can happen with any machine. And then you've got to get the unpicker out. So I just take a couple of seconds just to pull that up to the top. And then do a few stitches on the spot just to anchor those threads in. If you have a needle down facility, use that. If you haven't, whenever you stop, just turn the hand wheel so your needle's down. It does actually help keep everything lined up. So you're going to place your hands on here and you're going to lightly press, because what we want to do is when we move in this, we want to move the guide and the project at the same time, whereas this slippiness underneath helps it glide easier. Now you're just going to stitch along, and I stitch at a half a speed. I don't go too fast, and you can pause and just readjust your hands. Sometimes when you first start, it feels like it might feel like it's running away with you, but that's when you just pause and you just keep following it round. And I say, just keep that ruler foot just snug up against the outside. Go all the way along, and then we stop in there. Now, the packaging will give you the order of how you sew to get your rotations. So we're aiming to do an 8 rotation here, and the first section it goes in 4. So we're going to turn it round. You can turn the project or you can turn your tool. And we're going to bring it back round. Now you know you've got it in the correct place, because once you go back to your start point, you'll find that your lines will line back up on the grid. If you've lined it up on the incorrect line, that won't be in the centre, so you'll know that something's wrong. So to do the rotation, you'll always have that centre point lined up. So we've got that lined up now. So again, we're going to go around. And now a lot of people will do quilting in a matching thread to the project, or you can do a bright colour variegated thread. Looks absolutely fantastic. And I would set yourself up a practice piece as well, so you can just have a go and see, to get the motion of it and get the feeling of how they work. So we've stopped there. We're going to turn the tool. Now this time I'm going to go sideways, because we've got this here. We've designed these so they will fit within the throat of your machine. And we're going to line it back up, and then we're going round. And so you'll find your own way of which way feels best for you. And I'm a left-hander, which it shows it doesn't make any difference whatsoever. And we're going to go all the way around back to the start. And then if we bring this round again and we line it back up, we're going to line the centre up here. We're going to line the grid lines that we've drawn and the cross ones. Now, if you can actually see that the stitch line there, which is at the point of where we're going to finish sewing, is actually the start of that first one. So that shows how it perfectly matches up. So let's just join this first round, and we've got this 4 section done. Don't ever be afraid to pause. Rather, if you think it is running away with you, that's absolutely fine. A few stitches on the spot to secure, and then we'll take this out and have a look at it. So there we can see that's our 4-way rotation, and I'll just cut the back thread and I'll show you the back as well. Let me see how fabulous that is. Now you could leave it at that. You might only want to have a 4-way rotation, but we want to do an 8. So let's flip it back over. So now all we're going to do is just rotate, and we're going to use those opposite lines and do this exactly the same again. So line it up, stitch, rotate, line it up, stitch, rotate, and you just get into a rhythm. So just remember, get that thread up to the top. And then check it's lined up before you sew. This time I'll pop those gloves on so you can see. But say you don't, you can do it without. It gives a little bit of extra grip. It's, it's everyone's preference. But I like to use anything that makes something easier is fab. Absolutely fab. So we want a few stitches on the spot. Cut the thread. So we're going to go around in one go again here, 4 round, and then we will have that 8-way rotation. And all these designs as well, you will see them on the packaging with the steps and the actual numbered points of how to sew around them once you've drawn your grid out with the reference guide. So we're always there to hold your hand, and these video links will be on there as well for you to go back. So we're just going to wiggle it round back to the start, and when we've got back to the start you can then see which line is to line up. I'm going to pause, just reposition my hands. Now this time if you think, oh, that's a bit awkward, I'm on a bit of an angle, there's no harm in you actually turning your whole project. And it'll soon become second nature. And you'll want to quilt everything. Round again. Turn to make it easier. Go. And I think I'm going to spin it round. Have I got one more to do? Yes, I've got one more to do. You can see that you haven't gone through one of the points. And if you do have to trim it and take it out and start again from where you left off, that's totally fine. There we go. So now we've finished the 8-way rotation. So you can see there from the top. And then if I flip it over, cut my bottom thread, you can see how neat it is on the back. There's no loopy stitches or anything. It works out absolutely perfectly. And you also get this pretty design. So that's the 8-way rotation. Now let's do a 16. I'll just move the machine out of the way. And I'm going to get my grid reference guide and my heat erasable pen. So on the grid reference guide, we've got lines in between each of those grooves. This time what we're going to do is rotate that round and just line those lines up and the centre dot with the lines we drew previously. So remember we did 8 and we just want to line them up and then draw the line in between. So let's do that. So that's our last one drawn on. Now the other thing as well is if we look back at the guide again, see how we sewed around this outside section last time. We've also got this inside section here. Now this is for 2 reasons. 1, because it helps you move that guide around when you're sewing, but 2, you've got an extra pattern in there. And you can see on the packaging of how that one actually lays out. You've got a smaller area to cover, you can put a smaller design in, or you can do the 2, the 4, the 8 or the 16 like we're going to do now. It's exactly the same method. So let's make a little bit of room. So there we have our reference guides on. I'm going to bring in the machine. If you haven't got an extension table, you can always pile some books up or boxes or anything like that, just that raises it up. That the more space you have here, the better for you to work on. I find I get a better result. But give it a try. Okay, so we're going to take it under the machine and we're going to do exactly the same as the other rotations. Line up that centre, line up these ones. This time we're going on a one that we haven't used, which I've gone on a one we have used. So I'll just turn it round 1. Let's get that centre lined up. And you always check before you sew because you can see you haven't got any stitches in that area. Okay, we're going to bring that bobbin thread up. Okay. Now these guides as well have an anti-slip technology on them that gives them extra grip. Now if you find that you still have struggles holding it, try some of our spray and stay, the blue can. That's always a one must have to go to be fair, for anything that you want to stop. It gives it a bit of extra grip really. But I find that I can do these quite easily, but as a beginner I think I would, well, I wouldn't struggle, but anything that helps it make it easier basically. So all I'm doing is following it round, going back to the beginning, needle down, and with this one it's that 4-way rotation each time before having to stop, so we can go straight on. I'm just stopping to readjust when I get to a point where my arms feel a little bit awkward. Make sure my lines are back on. So what you don't want to do is overstretch yourself. Okay, 2 more to go, and then we'll have a 16 rotation. So this one is the Kaleidoscope pattern. It does make a very intricate design once you've got it all stitched out. But it's really so easy. Okay, line it up. I say I've got that needle down there. If you don't have that facility, like I say, just use the hand wheel. It just stops it from moving. And we're back to the start of where we finished. A few stitches on the spot, needle up, and then we have our design. Isn't that fantastic? Let's cut the bottom thread. So you can see how that makes a really intricate design from just that one simple shape. Now, how would you use that on your projects? So I've got a project here, this table runner. If I just pop the machine to the side. Now on a table runner, you can use your grid reference to mark out, but if, like with this one, obviously I've done squares and strips. This is where you can use your tool just to line up with those lines. So we've got this crosshair here. We could place it, lining it up with that square there and do the design. And then we could actually flip it and line it up that way and do the design, and do the design all the way down the middle. So it's totally up to you how you're going to do it. Just have a play and see what fantastic designs you can come up with. So this is our Gemini Kaleidoscope Rotating Quilting Pattern Guide.